Hi, the Mudbrooker here. A couple of years ago I made a video on how to run a Presto pressure canner, and I made a batch of maple beans in order to demonstrate how it was done. A lot of people have asked me for the recipe for the maple beans, so that's what I'm going to do here and now. Before I start though, I gotta tell you, this is not actually an approved recipe. I'm going to use instead of soaking the beans overnight and cooking them in your sauce, whatever you're cooking them in, and then canning them up, I'm simply going to put dry beans in the jar and then put liquid in with them and process them in the pressure canner. The reason it isn't approved is because even though you have your headspace right, you don't lose any liquid from the jar in the canning process, it tends to still absorb some water into the beans after canning, and you end up with a bit more of a void in there than you really want to have. It doesn't hurt the beans, it doesn't make them unsafe, but it's not going to be approved because the liquid level drops a bit on them after time. But anyhow, before I start on that, I would like to thank my supporters on Patreon, and you're certainly free to join them. I've got some nice little incentives over there if you go check it out. Kay's Kist, Benedict Riggers, Joy Jones, Damian Bamer, Leo, Theodore Engelke, Valentine Tolman, and Rudy Valvano. I'm going to have a little shot of Yukon Jack in their honor, and I hope you see fit to go over there and support me. Thank you for your support. Oh, that's good stuff. Anyhow, on with the recipe. The first step is to make your liquid. I have 4 quarts of water here, and to that I'm going to add, get my thing here, I'm going to add 3 cups of maple syrup, if I can get the damn thing open. Good Lord. Let me try this other one. Three cups of maple syrup. You can use pancake syrup for this too. You don't have to use genuine maple syrup, but the real maple syrup does taste quite a bit better, in my opinion anyway. And it's been a while since I made this, so I'm not quite sure if this is actually, man, that thing's going to struggle. I got another one here. Anyhow, so I'm not quite sure if this is going to be quite enough liquid for my beans, so I might have to make up a little bit more, but we'll give it a try and see how it goes. There's 2 cups and 3 cups. And the moral of this story is always make sure that you can get your bottles open before you start filming. Anyhow, 3 cups of maple syrup, a half a cup of ketchup, that's pretty close. Dump that in there. And once I get this in, I'll need a 1/4 cup of barbecue sauce. Where's my 1/4? There's my 1/4. A 1/4 cup of barbecue sauce. You don't have to be super precise. A 1/3 of a cup of cider vinegar. And I'm going to use that to rinse out my other cups a little bit. Oh, that's nice. Well, it's going to get boiled anyway, so that'll sterilize anything off my hands. Jesus, this is really going well today. Now, for some spices and some salt. I will need a teaspoon of canning salt. Everything is going to fight me today. Good Lord, look at that. A teaspoon of canning salt. A half a teaspoon. Where'd my half go? There it is. A half teaspoon of garlic powder. A teaspoon of cayenne pepper. You don't have to put cayenne pepper in there, but I like it. Gives a little bit of kick to them. Give her 2 halves. A teaspoon of ground mustard. And now we bring this up to a boil. Let it simmer a couple of minutes just to bring the flavors together a bit. And then while this is getting boiling, I'll set up my jars and my beans and we'll go on to the next step. Alrighty, my liquid came to a boil and I let it simmer for about 10 minutes just to kind of bring the flavors together. And I'm going to fill 1 jar just to show you how it's done. I won't make you watch me fill all of these. These are Great Northern beans. I didn't soak them, but I did wash them off good and pick out any of the bad ones. You'll get a few bad ones in just about every batch, so you'll want to do that. A lot of people pick out the ones that are broken in half. I don't really worry about that too much. But what you want to do, for pint jars, you want to use 1/2 cup of beans. Put that in your jar. Set that aside. Where's my ladle? And then fill the jar with your liquid until you have 1 inch of headspace left. I need a little bit more. There's 1 inch. Anyhow, you want to fill it up till you got 1 inch of headspace, and then I'll give that a stir to make sure there's no bubbles in there. I'll put a lid on it. Put a lid on it, and you put your ring on there finger tight, which for me is kind of tough because I got strong hands, and sometimes I get them a little too tight, and when you pressure can it, if your ring is too tight, it'll make the lid bulge up. And anyway, can't really see it when I tip it, but there's 1 inch of headspace left in there. I'm going to fill up the rest of my jars, and I'll be back when they're done and I start loading up the canners. Okay, I just remembered I forgot to wipe the rim on this jar before I put the lid on it when I was showing you how to put a lid on. So now I'll show you how you're actually supposed to do it. And another thing, when I washed these beans, none of them floated, but now some of them are. So it's not that big of a deal. They should be okay. Anyway, when you put your rings on, you want to wipe your lids. First you want to debubble it. Give it a little stir with something, poke it around a little bit, make sure there's no air bubbles left in there. Then you wipe your rim of your jar off with a paper towel wetted down with a little bit of white vinegar. Put a lid on it, which has been sitting in hot water. You don't need to scald lids anymore. It used to be you have to put them in boiling water for a few minutes to soften up the compound on them. But new lids, you don't have to do that. Just get them warmed up good. And then put your ring on finger tight. Now, I'm going to have to make another half a batch of liquid because this filled 13.5 pints. And you can see I got some more left over here. You use 1/2 cup of beans per pint, 1 cup per quart. I'm going to get these all jarred up, make some more fluid, and I'll be back when it's time to load up the canners. I got both canners up to pressure and running. I've already shown you how to deal with a Presto canner like this one, but I wanted to show you this guy. This is a 1953 model, number 7 Presto pressure canner that I've refurbished and got going again. I left the original gauge on there mostly for aesthetic purposes, but I replaced the gasket and the blowout plug. The original one was just a flat rubber plug, but the replacement has a little air vent in it. And I put a weighted gauge on there because I don't want to have to rely on the original gauge. It's a couple of pounds off. But I got this running, and I figured I'd show you this. One of these days, seeing as how I got it working good now, I'll sand these handles down and give them a good coat of spar varnish. But I just wanted to show you my old canner because it's just so darn cool. In keeping with the overall theme of things going wrong on this video, at some point this timer quit. It's brand new, it's junk, so I'm going to throw that in the garbage before long. But fortunately I knew that this canner here was 24 minutes ahead of this canner, so when the timer ran out on this, I could just set 24 minutes on my other timer, and things worked out good. Something I wanted to mention, old canners like this do not have a lid lock like that. So it is possible to open them under pressure, but how do you tell when the pressure is all the way gone? I can't go by my gauge because I know it's wrong, and even when the gauge gets down to 0, there's often a couple of pounds of pressure left. But the new style blowout plug have a little metal dingus in the middle of it that acts as an air vent, and it pops up when there's pressure on it, and when there's no pressure it'll drop down, and you can tell then that it's safe to open your canner. So take my weight off, and I'm going to set my camera down for a second so I can open this canner up, and then we'll take out my beans and see how they came out. Okay, these look really good. I don't see any signs of there being any siphoning on them. And we'll take these out, set them aside. When you take stuff out of your canner, a lot of people say you should cover it up with a towel and let them cool slowly. But you really shouldn't do that. What you should do is set them down on a towel like this so that there's a little bit of room between them so that they have space for air to circulate. This is to avoid a condition known as flat sour. What happens is there's certain microorganisms that are basically harmless, but they aren't killed by canning. And what can happen if they stay within a certain temperature range, I believe it's between 140 and 180 degrees Fahrenheit, these microorganisms can take off and cause a type of fermentation. They call it flat because it doesn't produce gas like yeast fermentation does, but it gives the food an unpalatable taste. It's not unsafe to eat, but you're not going to want to eat it. Some foods are more susceptible. Corn is especially susceptible. Meat not so much. But as you can see, these are still bubbling away. I didn't see any siphoning. And like I said, there's a tendency for these beans to absorb a little bit more water after they've cooled down. So other than that, if that happens to you, don't panic. They're still good, as long as you didn't get any siphoning right off the bat when you pulled them out of the canner. I'm going to let these cool off, and once my other canner is ready to open up and the little lock drops down, I'll get them out. And that's it for the maple bean recipe. Hope you enjoyed it. See you later.